Hi there, welcome. This is the Kelly's Astrology podcast, where you can find insight, guidance, and understanding through astrology. I'm Kelly, and I'll be your host.
Hey there, everyone, and welcome to this week's show. Today, I'll be talking all about the upcoming solar eclipse in Virgo, which is set for the 21st of September. I'm going to discuss how it is a South Node eclipse, and I'll be talking about what that can mean for your energy and for your mindset. I also want to do something we haven't done on the podcast before, but I think might be really helpful in the context of this eclipse in Virgo, and that is take a quick walk through how this eclipse will affect each rising sign. So I'm basically going to include some tips on topics where you might be experiencing the effects of this eclipse most, and that will be dependent on what your ascendant or rising sign is. So that'll be a helpful piece of information for you to have for today's show. Before we dive into all the eclipse insights, I want to let you know that my full astrology training program is now open for registration. If you sign up before September 20th, you can save with a special bundle offer, and that special bundle price is only available once a year, so now is your chance. All the details are over at kellysastrology.com. If you'd like to learn astrology in a supported and structured way, then I really encourage you to check out my astrology training program. Class starts on the 22nd, and it is perfect for beginners. Whether you want to be an astrologer yourself, or if you would like to learn astrology for personal growth and self-development, you will get inspiring and deep training. Learning astrology is kind of magical, and you will be profoundly changed by everything you explore inside the program. We also have a lot of fun along the way. I'm excited to welcome this year's intake of students. So if you'd like to be part of this very special community, pop over to kellysastrology.com where you can find out more or sign up today. Okay, now let's get back to this Virgo eclipse. So on Sunday, the 21st of September, there will be a solar eclipse. It's at 29 degrees Virgo. Now, if you're in Australia, that eclipse will be on the 22nd. Now, in a solar eclipse, which always happens at the new moon, so it's a solar eclipse, which means it's a new moon, but it's also telling us that the light of the sun is blocked. It's blocked for a period of time, and that is an unusual turn of events. So we have lots of themes right there. We have a sense of a regular rhythm or routine being disrupted, and that can contribute to this generally out of sorts or unsettled quality that kind of goes with eclipse season. But it also means that the things the sun represents may be blocked or blinded or reduced or unavailable for a period of time. Now, the sun is symbolic of leaders, of authority figures, of people in positions of power, people literally in the spotlight. So when we say at a solar eclipse, the sun's light is blocked and the sun itself is eclipsed, we're talking about changes to people in positions of power. So changes to do with leaders and authority figures. Almost as though they themselves are eclipsed, that someone or some other entity steps in to take over the role that the leader would typically play. So leadership changes are a no-brainer to kind of have on your radar around the solar eclipse. Now, historically, eclipses were used to predict more for leaders and countries, but, we do use eclipses in different ways now. So people in positions of leadership at all levels of society could be affected. And a part of that thinking historically was that a solar eclipse was considered a particularly problematic event for somebody like a king, a queen, a prime minister, a president. And so during a solar eclipse, it is possible that a leader will step down or otherwise be unable to continue in their position. So become unable to fulfill the duties of their role, for instance. And so we want to keep that in mind. Of course, an eclipse like this is a global thing, so it's not necessarily going to happen in every area, but we may see one or two significant changes to leadership around the globe. Now, at a personal level, which is probably the level that most of you are working with your astrology, so at this personal level, for everyday people like you and me, we could think about this eclipse as a time where the light that normally guides you is unavailable. So you might feel disconnected from the inspiration that normally leads you forward. And so that can leave us feeling sometimes a little bereft or uncertain. I knew there was a reason I headed down this path, but it's not in my awareness right now. That can be part of the eclipse vibe. But it can also be a clue that if we're not just, using that solar influence, which is often very visible and clear, instead we have to turn to the moon, because at a solar eclipse, it's the moon's light or the moon's presence that is interfering with the sun. Almost like saying, in an unusual turn of events, we would like moon or lunar symbols and people to lead the way now. Now, in kind of global or world astrology, the moon is a symbol for the people rather than the leader. And so we have this idea of the mood of the people taking over, like the will of the king, for instance. That's a symbolic take on the moon dominance at a solar eclipse. And so if we bring that into the personal realm, and we think about the moon dominating the sun, we think about feelings and mood overriding maybe logic or rational thought. So you could be a little more sensitive. We can also be aware that if the bright visible light of the sun is kind of unavailable, the subtle awareness, that subtle insight or that kind of body knowledge, which is all represented by the moon, that is something that becomes more acute, or you may be able to tap into it more. So it's very subtle. It's more like those inklings rather than the clarity, but we want to get quiet so we can tune into those around this eclipse. Now, there's a few planets that have an influence on this eclipse, so I want to talk about them, and then we will get into our quick sign-by-sign breakdown. So first off, this is a solar or new moon eclipse, and it is near the south node. Now, whichever node the eclipse is near does give us some really important information about the quality of energy during the eclipse. So this is a south node eclipse, and that is an eclipse that suggests endings, clearing out, and release. In traditional styles of astrology, the south node is thought of as a point of decrease. So it reduces, it diminishes, it makes smaller, and it's associated in myth as this place of elimination, the place where we would release waste, or we would let go of things that maybe have turned toxic or have become more draining and depleting than anything else. So anytime we have a south node eclipse, and we typically have 2 of these a year on average, sometimes we might have 3, but typically it's 2. And so this south node eclipse, it's in Virgo, which we already know is a sign of purification and has like a minimalist approach. With the south node eclipse, it is about letting go. It's about endings. It is about the idea of things coming apart. So decrease or disintegration is a great way of thinking about this eclipse. So at a practical everyday level, if you want to declutter or reorganize parts of your home, your workspace, this is a great eclipse to do that at a very practical level. But the general tone of this eclipse is like decrease, release, disintegration. So we're not going to use it for intention setting, for building, or for beginning new and important things. That's not what this eclipse is for. The South Node is also a deeply spiritual point. And so during a South Node eclipse, often what we're doing is becoming aware of how our intentions have changed. You might find that you're less interested in things like ambition or accumulation because those things are not South Node things. Instead, with the South Node in Virgo, you might be finding yourself drawn to things that are more meaningful, that have a helpful quality, or that really get your intellect going. The South Node does have this spiritual connotation, and so we often shift our perspective towards things that kind of serve us or are the right thing to do because they're the right thing to do, and away from that modern focus on ambition and achievement and accumulation. It's sort of questioning that and finding what is right for you in the midst of that. So letting go of maybe social, cultural, or family pressure to, get ahead and to tick all the kind of typical boxes, and instead choosing the boxes that are most interesting to you, that you can connect with in a way that won't deplete you. So with the South Node being really active, it's a clue that depletion is in the mix, and we want to become clear on who or what is draining us so we can figure out how to plug that hole or reduce our exposure to what is draining us. So given that this is a South Node eclipse in Virgo, it actually is a really lovely omen for letting go of ideas and of thoughts and of kind of critical behaviors that aren't serving you. So if you have a thought pattern or a belief system running that is inhibiting your unfoldment, we want to try and clear that now. So shifting our thinking, changing the quality or kind of information that we're taking in. This is all because the eclipse is in Virgo, which is a sign ruled by Mercury, and that's all about the mind. So we're thinking about how can I clear what's not helpful for my mind, and how can I replace it with things that are more calming or interesting in a kind of nourishing way for the mind. So if you can explore ways to let go of what unsettles your mind and instead opt for input, whether that's philosophical input, spiritual input, or just higher quality input for your mind, you might find that you can really use this eclipse as a powerful shift for your mindset and your thought patterns. Simple things that come to mind: switching time on social media for time reading a book, or switching some of your scrolling to watching a show with a plot line, maybe a 45-minute story arc. I know people are the gradients of, social media, TV, etc. If you're watching a long form narrative thing, like a TV show, even better is a movie, something that's going to have you following a plot development with character development over a 90-minute or longer timeline. There's actually some really good value in participating in storytelling. So whether that means watching longer shows that aren't reality TV, whether that means reading books, a lot of it is going to mean reducing attention given to the online space or, the social media space, and thinking about increasing the quality of what your mental attention is going towards. And so I think there'll be lots of great insights and maybe even some research and studies coming out around this eclipse about what is damaging to our minds and what is more helpful and nourishing to our minds. So that's what we can use this eclipse for. Now, because the South Node has that decreased quality, eclipses near the South Node can certainly have a tiring quality. So it's very normal to feel a bit worn out, a bit spent, maybe even a bit mentally frazzled, or even a little bit of that mental burnout. Like, I can't think anymore. I can't make any more decisions. I can't handle any more logistics. Whatever it might be, that's very common with an eclipse on the South Node. So mental rest, giving your brain a break, will be really important. Now, this eclipse is also opposite Saturn, and that is a planet that definitely has a weary quality to it. So between the eclipse being on the South Node and the eclipse being opposite Saturn, that idea of feeling tired, worn out, just in need of rest or a slower pace, that's very likely, especially on Sunday, the 21st, but maybe even for the 24 hours before the eclipse as well. So I've mentioned that the eclipse, it is at 29 Virgo, and that means it will be opposite Saturn, which is at 28 Pisces. And so Saturn's influence kind of in the mix on this eclipse might highlight reality and limits, that idea of getting clear where the stopping point or end points need to be, where you need to have a no, I can't, I'm unavailable. These are all Saturn phrases. And so with Saturn in the mix, given that it's a South Node eclipse, there's a little bit of a repetition of theme here around ending or around recognizing what needs to be reduced or consolidated in some way. With Saturn, we're willing to do the effort, but only for the one or two priorities that really matter, and we don't want to be distracted by other things. So between the Saturn and the South Node influence, there's definitely this sense of only who or what really matters is getting in right now. Okay, so that's Saturn's influence on the eclipse. We've talked about the South Node. I want to talk briefly about Mercury, which is the ruler of this eclipse in Virgo. So the ruler of the eclipse is Mercury because the eclipse is in a Mercury-ruled sign in Virgo. Now, at the time of the eclipse, Mercury will be in Libra. And Mercury's next applying aspect is, in fact, to Jupiter, although it's a very long application. It's about 16 degrees, more than 10 days before Mercury will get to Jupiter. And so there's a few clues that we can take based on this aspect pattern that the eclipse ruler Mercury is making. We could imagine that the eclipse is a chance to clear before we move to growth. So even though it's a new moon or solar eclipse, because it's on the South Node, I do have that concept of endings before beginnings. We have to clear, release, say no, and we have to sit in the empty space before we do the new thing. And with this Mercury ruler of the eclipse having this long applying aspect to Jupiter, to me, there is some sort of reward, or there is a sense of purpose, or there is this orientation towards new possibilities for growth that will ultimately come out of whatever it is you choose to release, change, downsize through this eclipse in Virgo. So there's a few pieces to think about there. I also think we want to take into consideration Mercury is in the sign of Libra. The ruler of the eclipse in Virgo is in Libra. And so Mercury in Libra, of course, is very interested in discussion, in debate, in negotiation. So there is this sort of tactful quality to communication with Mercury in Libra, but there is a real willingness to air things out, to discuss the pros and cons, to look at both sides, and to really do that very respectful kind of negotiation. So that's part of this eclipse. We want to be focused on themes of fairness, of justice, and compromise, which is all part of what Mercury in Libra is focused on. And because Mercury in Libra is the manager or ruler of this eclipse, that kind of feeds back into the eclipse experience itself. So if we pull what we've talked about so far together, this is a South Node eclipse in Virgo. It is a new moon or solar eclipse. And this can be an eclipse that helps you shift your thinking, to release old patterns of thinking, to try a new approach in communication. And the idea of shifting your thinking, becoming aware of activities or encounters, or sometimes even people or duties and obligations we have that are draining or depleting you. You kind of have to do, what in business they call a cost-benefit analysis. Like, this is the cost of this interaction or experience for me. Is the outcome worth the cost? And there's going to be at least one thing, probably more, where you realize the cost, whether it's time, energy, emotion, or financial, that is going into something is not worth it based on what is coming out. So under this eclipse, you might get clear on something that needs to end. It may be that you get clear on something you need to take a break from, where and how you need more rest because you're mentally maybe a little overextended is going to become very clear. And so the idea of what needs to end or where do I need to hit pause for now is really up under this eclipse. You might encounter a limit that you can't push past, or you might really come to appreciate that it is natural for things to come to a conclusion, like the seasons in nature. I wish that my rose bushes bloomed all year round, but they simply don't. They need a rest, they need a break, they need some hibernation time. And so this eclipse might help you realize where things need to be, concluded or wound down for now. And you never know what that empty space will lead to next. So pulling out of things rather than going into things is definitely part of what this eclipse is for. As you're working through what you want to minimize, what you want to release, you may open up energy and space for future possibilities. You don't need to rush into those new things. We're not in the new space yet. For now, the goal is really to let this eclipse guide you as to where and how you can get quiet, you can simplify, you can reduce. As you do this, you may find that you're learning a lot of really important insights and information about how your preferences and your priorities have changed. So the fact that something you used to love being involved in is now draining or depleting you, that's a clue that you've changed, that your circumstances have changed, and you want to be really honest both with yourself and others around that as best you can. This is, after all, an eclipse ruled by Mercury, so we're having ideas that are prompting new conversations. All right, so with all of that in mind, with all of that said, that's kind of what we typically do with our look at the eclipse or a new or full moon. What I'm going to take a few minutes and do now is just kind of go quickly through mentioning which house and which topics are being affected by this eclipse for each rising sign. So if you think about this eclipse is about endings and letting go, about feeling maybe drained, or figuring out how we want to decrease and simplify a part of our lives, each of us is called to do this in a different part of our life based on the house area that this Virgo eclipse is activating for each of us. And just to preface this eclipse in Virgo is kind of like a punctuation point that is calling you to go really deeply into a process of clearing that has been going on since January of 2025. That's when the South Node moved into Virgo and really has been encouraging release, has been bringing forward agitation or restlessness. The South Node will be in Virgo until the middle of 2026. So you'll be working intensely on the clearing around these topics through this latter part of September under the solar eclipse in Virgo, but you won't necessarily be completely done with that until mid-2026. So I wanted to just mention some of those technical components. All right, so first sign, of course, Aries. So if you're an Aries ascendant, so this is not if you have the sun in Aries and you were born in late March or early April. That's not what I'm talking about. It's if Aries was on the rising sign, that first house ascendant position in your birth chart. If you don't know your rising sign or your ascendant, you need to take your birth time and you need to pop your chart details into some astrology software to figure it out. So that's the info. That's the data point we're using. So if you're an Aries ascendant, this Virgo eclipse is in the 6th house for you. So you may be focused on work and health routines. Some Aries ascendant people will be dealing with a health matter that requires a lot of tender loving care, a lot of extra support. Some Aries ascendant people will be really focused on balancing relationships with coworkers and with colleagues so that they're not depleted by the people that they're working with. Other Aries ascendant people might be just thinking, I'm just a little overwhelmed with work right now. How can I better manage my work tasks so they're not taking everything I've got and I've got nothing left elsewhere in life? So Aries ascendant, this is a 6th house eclipse for you. So it's in the 6th house areas of life where you are thinking about shifting priorities and you're thinking about what you can let go of. What do I need to change that's going to improve my health? What do I need to stop doing that makes my body feel better? What do I need to stop doing or change that is going to make my day-to-day work experience more, I don't know if I want to say enjoyable, but maybe less draining than what it currently is? So there are a couple of reflection questions for the Aries Rising chart. Okay, so next up, we're going to take a look at the Taurus Rising chart. So if you have a Taurus ascendant, the Virgo eclipse is going to fall in your 5th house, which is associated with fun, with leisure and pleasure, relaxation activities, and of course with children. So it also speaks to topics to do with fertility, as well as things like games and sports, all 5th house topics. So with the Virgo eclipse in your 5th house, if you're a Taurus ascendant, you're going to be thinking about what is it about my leisure activities that is actually draining me rather than making me feel good. And so there may be something that you are doing in a social context or for relaxation that might seem like it's relaxing in the moment, but is actually depleting you. So we're questioning what we're doing for fun, and we're trying to explore whether there are more maybe spiritually interesting topics we could do for fun. It may be that you've lost your enthusiasm for some of the relaxation and leisure activities that you previously really enjoyed. And so don't feel that you have to keep doing them, even if you are like not enjoying them the way you used to. In terms of things like children with the fifth house, with this eclipse there may be a clue that there's a rhythm or a pattern or a routine in your life related to children that is really draining you. It's really tiring you out, and any parent of kids will let you know that sometimes it is a very tiring experience. It may be that the kids have too much going on and we want to simplify the kids' schedule so that in turn you aren't so exhausted. So if you're a Taurus rising chart, you're really thinking about how can I balance, how I see being a good parent with my kids, but also making sure that we're not all exhausted from just running around doing too many things. So we want to balance that a little bit. So for Taurus rising, the eclipse is in a really fun part of your chart, but we're thinking about how can we do fun differently in a way that isn't as tiring, and how can we kind of do our role with children differently so that it is a little more nourishing and less diminishing for everyone involved. So that's our Taurus rising. The Gemini rising chart will have this the Gemini rising chart will have the Virgo eclipse in the fourth house. This is to do with home, family, and living situation. So if your ascendant is Gemini, the eclipse in your fourth house is cluing you in that there's something about your home and living situation or something about a family dynamic that is really taking it out of you. So you could think about what is involved in the upkeep and maintenance of your home. Is it that the rent is too high? Is it that there's too much yard maintenance? Is it that there's just a lot of repairs going on that seem to be taking more than they're giving? And we're just thinking about, if this is necessary, how am I making space for this? So if with the Gemini rising ascendant, the Virgo eclipse in the fourth is a clue that we might need to reorganize or reshape home and our living situation to make it a little more manageable and a little less tiring or draining. Family dynamics, family relationships, also important to be in that review stage if you're a Gemini ascendant. There may be a clue that there is a situation with a family member, could be a parent, a sibling, a child, someone you live with, that is really affecting you in a way that is like tiring you out or giving you a real lot of worry. So we're just navigating, how can I reduce my exposure to that? How can I be more clear about my, the information or the needs in this mix? And so with the Gemini rising chart with this eclipse in the fourth house, there may be an old family pattern that we're wanting to end, that we're wanting to stop. So maybe you've played a certain role with family and you think, I'm just not going to fall into that pattern anymore. I'm going to act different or be different, and they can adapt or not. Family is always a bit of a wild card, but you can change your pattern, your contribution so that it is less diminishing for you. So that's the Gemini rising chart. For the Cancer ascendant, Cancer rising chart, this eclipse will be in your third house. And this is a part of the chart specifically to do with siblings. And it also has a lot to do with communication, with learning, with things like writing, editing, and even a little bit to do with teaching. So for the Cancer rising chart, this eclipse in Virgo is telling you that we may have to have some sort of letting go experience around a sibling. And that can be for a wide range of reasons. It could be because there is an unhealthy dynamic that you don't want to participate in anymore. It might be because your sibling is doing something wonderful. They may be doing something wonderful in their lives, which may mean they're less available to, explore the sibling bond that you typically have. So sometimes the letting go is like, I'm sad to see you go, but I wish you well because you're off on something fun and interesting. So for Cancer rising charts, that may be relevant in your relationship with siblings. With the third house involvement for Cancer Rising, we also want to think about really getting that high quality sources of information, knowledge, and learning. So you're either upping your game in terms of the knowledge and information you're bringing in, or you're upping your game in the kinds of topics that you want to be talking about. So really thinking, leaning hard into the communication and the intellect. What are we letting go of to reduce worry, to reduce stress, to reduce anxiousness? And how can we put better quality sources in here so my mind is generally in a better place? So for the Cancer Rising chart, a lot of those Mercury themes are kind of reiterated by the house placement that the eclipse is taking place in for you. Totally different story for the Leo rising chart, because for the Leo rising chart, we have this eclipse in Virgo in the second house, which is the primary place of money, cash flow, and income. So if you're a Leo ascendant, this eclipse in Virgo is really calling your attention to financial matters, to that sort of personal finance space. Am I earning as much as I want? Am I having to pay too high a price around stress for the income I'm earning? That could be some of the bigger questions you're thinking about. Second house also has a lot to do with our kind of income expenditure balance. Am I spending more than I'm earning? Am I saving enough for the future? All of those types of personal budgeting pieces come up when we get the second house activated. So if you're a Leo ascendant chart, there's a lot about money, about spending, about saving. You might be thinking about earning differently, but there's also a lot about after we've earned, what am I doing with my money? And with this being a South Node eclipse, there may be some money habits that you've fallen into that aren't in your best financial interest in the long term. So we could use this South Node eclipse in Virgo in the second house if you are a Leo rising to think about what bad money habits do I want to ditch and what better money habits do I want to try out. So that kind of trial and error about improving the flow of cash into your life. Obviously, with wealth piece, we want to have more coming in than going out, and a portion of what's coming in invested or saved for the long term. And if you're not in a position like that with this Leo rising chart, this eclipse might really bring home the kind of uncertain state of personal finances. So we want to keep an eye on the money piece for the Leo rising chart. Now, for the Virgo rising or Virgo ascendant, of course, this eclipse is in your first house. The first house is about you, your personality, your mindset, your body, your vital life force, your physical well-being. So for Virgo rising charts, this is a clue. This eclipse can help you clarify what is depleting my vitality and how do I need to reduce my exposure to that. So the focus, if you're a Virgo ascendant with this eclipse in your first house, is what could I do differently that is going to make my body function better? And there's probably 2 or 3 very specific things. If I stop doing this, I'll have an improvement over here. If I maybe add this healthier thing in or this more nourishing for my body thing in, it's going to boost something that is diminished. So we want to think about where is that reduction happening to do with health, physical vitality, well-being, and how could we buffer against that? Is there a supplement I need? Do I need to make a change with food or movement or lifestyle choices? So there's a real focus on yourself, on your body with this eclipse in your first house, of course. And of course, the other piece about the personality is with this eclipse on the South Node in your first house, you may be getting clear on some personality traits, like maybe there's an attitude or a habit or a behavior that you're doing that you're like, that's actually working against me. I'm doing this, but I really want to get over here. So if I stop doing this thing, it's going to help me move more towards the thing that I want. Spiritual wisdom will be a great source of inspiration and encouragement for you if you are a Virgo rising during this eclipse. So I would say especially the physical rest and caring for your body, super important for the Virgo rising, Virgo ascendant chart through this eclipse. Now we come to Libra ascendant. where the Virgo eclipse will be in the 12th house, the place of retreat, of rest, of kind of choosing a more isolated or secluded setting. So there's some repetition of spiritual themes here for the Libra Ascendant chart, the South Node, and of course the 12th house. We want to rest, we want to retreat, we maybe want to withdraw from regular life. Maybe for this weekend, you want to have like a quiet stay-at-home kind of weekend. Maybe you're questioning the overall structure of your life and wanting to put more of these kind of 12th house punctuation moments into it, like a rest day each week or a stay-at-home evening every week, whatever that looks like for you. The 12th house can also be the repository of worries or fears from the past. And sometimes when we have a 12th house activation like the Libra Ascendant is having under this eclipse, we need to get quiet to do some really profound healing. So spiritual healing, emotional, energetic release and clearing, all possible for the Libra Rising chart with this eclipse in the 12th house. There's a totally different experience coming in for the Scorpio Rising chart because, of course, for the Scorpio Ascendant, this Virgo eclipse is in the 11th house, which is a very outgoing, social, kind of community-focused house. It's really about other people. So for the Scorpio Ascendant chart, this eclipse is cluing you into your friendships and your groups and the organizations that you're a part of. Now, because it's an eclipse about endings, you may be realizing that there is a tie with a friend that you think, I am just putting so much into this friendship. I'm really not getting a lot back. I'm going to withdraw and just like not put so much into that friendship. Now, for the Scorpio Rising chart, this can extend to community groups or organizations that you're also a part of where you're thinking, I'm really devoting a lot here and I'm just not getting a sense of satisfaction, or I'm feeling more drained by this than I expected. I might be rethinking my involvement with this group or this organization. So for the Scorpio Rising chart, it really will be a time to think about which, friendships, social networks, or group and community organizations am I thinking that I want to pull back from? Because remember, this eclipse is ultimately about reducing. So every topic, every house that this eclipse is hitting is like, how can I reduce there? How can I, do less here? Or how can I kind of buffer against things that are reducing me or are draining me in this part of my chart and life? Okay, we're getting to our last few signs. Sag Ascendant, Sagittarius Rising. The Virgo eclipse will be in your 10th house, which is to do with career, public role, reputation, your sort of more widely known roles and responsibilities, if you like. And so for the Sagittarius Rising chart, it may be some deep questioning about life path, about career direction, about professional responsibilities. And it can be a mix of, I don't feel so connected to the work I'm doing and I wonder about making changes. It can also be a little bit about, if you have a really strong spiritual or service element to the work that you do, it may be, I can see that I'm sacrificing for this, but I really believe in the mission or the cause and I want to keep going. I think there's still a little bit of a caution in here of like, it's great if you do have work that you believe in, but you just want to make sure that work isn't consuming the best of what you've got to offer. And that's a really important consideration for the Sagittarius Ascendant under this Virgo eclipse in late September. So just thinking about, are there some ways where I could kind of plug the holes that are really draining me where work is concerned? Is it a relationship with a coworker or your boss? Is it a commute? Can you try to work from home a little bit more? Is it the industry that you're in? Is it the kind of role? Again, it's not the kind of eclipse that necessarily says I'm building my career, but it's questioning, why am I going down this path? Do I still want to be going down this road? Is there a different direction that might mean more to me? So some big kind of existential questions for the Sag Ascendant chart, especially about work and career, which is probably on brand because Sag Ascendant is always got that kind of search for meaning a little bit anyway. So if we move now to Capricorn, this Virgo eclipse will be in the ninth house. And the ninth house is a part of the chart to do with wisdom, spirituality, our belief system. It's also about travel and adventure, and it has that learning kind of academic quality to it as well. So for the Capricorn Ascendant chart, there's a few ways this could show up. The eclipse in Virgo might be asking you to give up other things so you can pursue a knowledge journey or a physical adventure, a trip that you really want to go on. There may be a caution about doing too much in those areas. So yes, it's great you want to do this big trip, but is it going to take more time or money than you really have? And if so, does it have to happen now? Can it happen in a smaller way? We're thinking about reduce. So with the Capricorn Ascendant, maybe there is a path of study or like a spiritual path that you want to explore. Do you have to go all in on it, or can you do it in small ways to begin the journey without, giving everything into it, without being drained by it? So there's some great questions there for the Capricorn Ascendant chart. Now we have to look at the Aquarius Ascendant, where this Virgo eclipse will be in the 8th house, which is another one of our money sectors. It does have to do more with things like shared money, which can include taxes, inheritances, family money, money in the context of a romantic or professional partnership. And so for the Aquarius Ascendant charts, there's a lot of discussion that may be coming up under this eclipse around how are we pooling our resources? Are there ways that we could do this differently so that it feels more fair, so that we don't have one person giving more into the shared pot than the other? For Aquarius rising charts, I would also encourage you to make sure that you are on top of any tax or loan obligations that you might have. If you do have any big financial obligations that you're finding a bit of a struggle to keep right now, have those conversations. That ruler of this eclipse, Mercury in Libra, there's nothing wrong with just opening a dialogue about could you, restructure the payments or the interest rate or the timeline, whether that's a tax debt that you have, a tax liability, or whether it's a loan of some kind. So if you want to renegotiate financial obligations and you're an Aquarius ascendant, doing so under this eclipse, there's a lot of energy about change. How could we do things differently? And you're coming from the point of how could I make these financial obligations less draining or depleting? And so that's what we're thinking about here. So that's a little bit there for the Aquarius ascendant chart. And our final ascendant, the Pisces rising chart, this eclipse will be in the 7th house if you're a Pisces ascendant. So Virgo, of course, 7th house. So here we're looking at reduction or reducing or clearing where relationships are concerned. So we're thinking about what is the cost to you as a Pisces ascendant for the partnerships that you're involved in? Are there types of partnerships that you're involved in that you want to take time away from or that you think you don't want to be involved in anymore? Is there maybe one, professional partnership or romantic relationship where you're like, this is just taking so much more than I expected. And then we just want to, weigh up, if you're in a long-term relationship, for instance, we do have these spins and roundabouts where one person is contributing more than the other. And you just want to kind of, identify, is this reasonable given the historical context of our relationship? If it's a newer relationship, you might be thinking, is it going to be like this forever? And if you're giving a lot more to others, you may need extra care for yourself so that you're not really depleted and drained by that. The Pisces rising chart, questioning a lot about those associations and partnerships and maybe being inclined to be less available or less involved at the moment while you're questioning what is going to be sustainable for you in the long term. And just to go back to the Aquarius ascendant chart for a sec, this idea of the emptying out of the South Node eclipse in the 8th house for the Aquarius ascendant, you may be thinking, I want to clear debt, I want to pay things off. And that's another really constructive way to use this eclipse, just doing it in a way that isn't going to totally drain or deplete you along the way, if you like. Just last thing for that, I'd already gone on to the Pisces, so I just wanted to add that in. Of course, for the Pisces rising chart, we are thinking about how can I do relationships with others differently so that I'm not so spent by my interactions with others. So hopefully that is a helpful little look there for each of the different ascendant signs and some of the specific topics and areas of life where you may be reevaluating, reducing, and clearing through this eclipse in Virgo. So let me know if you liked this extra info. Let me know how this eclipse is coming up for you. I'm always interested to hear from podcast listeners, how you're enjoying the show. If there are questions that you want me to consider in future episodes, pop them all in the comments section below. But that is it from me for now, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care during the eclipse, go slow, and think about what it is you want to let go. If learning astrology is something that you are ready for right now, I invite you to pop over to kellysastrology.com. Check out my very special bundle price offer, which is only available till September 20th. And perhaps I will see you in class real soon. Until then, everyone, take care.